Vocals typically need the most attention in a mix. Every listener is acutely familiar with how they sound, so getting them right takes a lot of focus. Here are some of the most important things that I figured out over the past 15 years or so that I want to share with anyone that's interested in improving their vocals. So if you're having trouble with mixing vocals, please by any means steal these ideas. Starting off, let me share what I call a foundational chain. A foundational chain follows a strict format to keep things as easily controllable as possible. In other words, as a signal travels from one processor to the next, there's very little conflicting processing, which is to say, no processor is undoing what another processor did before it. So for a vocal, here's what I'd recommend. Start with subtractive EQ to balance the vocal. That means a high-pass filter below the fundamental frequency range to cut out unneeded and unmusical frequencies, a bell filter to adjust the relationship between the fundamentals and low-order harmonics, usually to reduce some of the extra energy in the low mids. Then a bell filter in the mids to high mids to reduce some nasally tones, which are also higher-order harmonics or multiples of the fundamental. Sibilance is unrelated to the fundamental frequencies and can be controlled better with a dynamics processor, either a de-esser or a dynamic bell filter. Now, with the frequency response controlled, next control the dynamics with a peak-down compressor. Attenuate the peaks by 3 to 6 dB, up to 8 dB for aggressive genres, and introduce makeup gain to bring up quiet details. Then, insert an upward processor, like the Oxford Inflator, to bring quieter details up even further and create a dense upfront sound. Now, this plugin has gotten pretty affordable over the years, but there is a free, nearly one-to-one remake of it on GitHub. Now, a processor like this will also introduce harmonic distortion that fills the spectrum and it adds to the musical content of the frequency response. So far, the frequency response and the dynamics, both from the top down and the lower amplitudes up, have been controlled. So this can serve as the foundation for your vocal chain. After it, do whatever you see fit and add any creative effects that work well for the song. This could be reverb, delay, chorusing, pitch and amplitude modulation, heavy distortion or amp emulation. Any creative effect is going to work well if it's built on top of this foundation. Now, once you have your creative effects introduced and you're happy with them, a final EQ at the end of the chain lets you shape everything that came before it. Let's take a quick listen to this foundation, then I'll add a couple of different combinations of creative effects after it so you can hear how you could branch off from it.
Think it was impossible, may have been a bit of trouble. Think it was impossible, may have been a bit of trouble. Think it was impossible, may have been a bit of trouble.
Next up, let's talk about knowing the notes, or at least the root note. Now, a little music theory goes a long way when you're mixing, especially when the vocal is the main focus of a song. Now, personally, I know very little music theory, but I always make it a point to learn the root note of the vocal performance. Once I know it, it affects a lot of decisions that I make. To find it, I typically just use a frequency analyzer and see what fundamental frequency occurs most often. The fundamental is easy to spot. It's the first high amplitude spike. Again, it'll move around during the performance as the vocalist changes notes, but if I pick the most frequently occurring one, odds are I've found the root note. Now, the Pro Q3 has a piano roll at the bottom, which makes it easy to find what the note is, but if you're using a different frequency analyzer, you could just look up the frequency. For example, if the frequency is 110 Hz, you could just Google what note is 110 Hz, and you'll have an answer. Now, remember back to what I said in the first section of the video. The nasal tones will be higher order harmonics. If I pick the note that's occurring most often, then the nasal resonances will most often be multiples of that fundamental frequency. So if the fundamental is 110 Hz, odds are the nasal resonances occur at 770 Hz, 880 Hz, 990 Hz, 1100 Hz, and maybe 1210 Hz. These are the 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, and 11th order harmonics, respectively. Again, these harmonics are just whole number multiples of the fundamental, so 110 Hz times 7, 110 Hz times 8, and so on. Now, these are fantastic starting points for finding what to attenuate. The best choice, in my opinion, is to find the harmonic that's highest in amplitude, center a bell on it, and vary the Q value so that the area around it is attenuated but to a lesser extent than the primary nasally harmonic. Now, of course, use your ears. The vocal will interact uniquely with the surrounding instrumentation, which may make attenuating a different frequency more effective. But knowing this offers a lot of guidance as to where to start. The same could be said for frequencies that I want more of. If I want a super full sounding vocal, I could amplify one of the fundamentals and shape the filter with the Q value to amplify other frequencies as I see fit. If I want more clarity, then I could amplify a multiple of the fundamental between 2 to 5 kilohertz or the vocal's third formant. This way, I'm boosting the area with a lot of vowel and consonant information while emphasizing the musical aspects of the performance. This is a lot like what a saturator does, but instead of generating overtones through wave shaping, I'm amplifying the overtones that exist naturally in the vocal. You could even do this with the air frequency if you wanted to. At that point, there probably aren't any natural harmonics to adjust, but if there's signal occupying the frequency that relates to the root note, it could be boosted to introduce a small amount of extra musicality into the performance. Aside from EQ, this could be used creatively. For example, say I use reverb as a send. I could follow it with a linear phase EQ and amplify in-key frequencies in the ranges I want more of. The same could be done to the output of any other time-based or temporal effect. So, it's information that can help you make more musical decisions, as well as guide you to finding the most likely culprits for issues in the frequency balance. So, let's take a listen to the vocal, affected with filters that target the root note and its overtones. Notice how effective the EQ is, since the bells are centered on frequencies that are present in the vocal and not just in their general area.
Think it was impossible. May have been a bit of trouble. Think it was impossible. May have been a bit of trouble. Think it was impossible. May have been a bit of trouble.
Get professional analog mastering that accurately translates what you hear in your head. Seriously though, when people work with us, they get results. That's why major industry professionals like Keith Urban's producer Aaron Schurz works with us, Grammy award-winning AJ Castillo, Billboard #1 charted artist Megan Lindsay, Grammy award-winning artist Toulis, The Voice singer Cody Ballou, Grammy-nominated producer Tyler Kane, Warner Music artist Ricky Young, and the list goes on. Watch the rest of this video, and at the end, use the link in the description to get direct access to us for personalized analog mastering that accurately translates what you hear in your head. Next up, let's talk about working with clip gain and automation. Now, most of you probably already know this, but if this keeps one person from making the time-consuming mistake that I did, then it's worth covering. When I first started making records, I remember using automation to try and control the volume of my vocal at various points in the song. Then, I'd add a new effect or maybe change a setting on one, and suddenly, everything sounded different, or the effect that I expected to happen didn't happen. This seems obvious to me now, but at the time I had no idea that all volume automation was occurring after all of my effects. Nothing I was doing was affecting the original vocal, only the processed vocal. When I found a section that was hitting the compressor too hard and I automated it, that did absolutely nothing to solve the problem. When the vocal changed amplitudes during a different take, and now the processing sounded different, volume automation didn't help. The routing is truly the most important aspect of all things audio related, and mixing is no exception. So the routing goes the file stored on your computer, the waveform or track as you see it in your DAW, all effects in parallel sends, the volume fader, a bus if the vocal is routed to one, and if not, then directly to the stereo output. Now clearly, by adjusting the fader with volume automation, I misunderstood the very strict cause and effect relationship that's inseparable from the signal path. What I needed to do was adjust the clip gain. This directly adjusts the gain of the signal prior to processing. All this to say, don't touch volume automation or even effect automation until you have your chain established. If you want more or less signal going into your effects chain, use clip gain. If you want to make a volume adjustment to the already processed vocal, maybe you want the vocal up 1 dB during the chorus or something, that's when you use automation. Get professional analog mastering that accurately translates what you hear in your head. Seriously though, when people work with us, they get results. That's why major industry professionals like Keith Urban's producer Aaron Schurz works with us, Grammy award-winning AJ Castillo, Billboard #1 charted artist Megan Lindsay, Grammy award-winning artist Tulis, The Voice singer Cody Ballou, Grammy-nominated producer Tyler Kane, Warner Music artist Ricky Young, and the list goes on. Why waste your time creating masters that don't accurately translate what you hear in your head when you could instantly fix a problem by clicking the link in the description and working directly with professionals who have already done what you're trying to do? We've mastered thousands of songs that accurately translate what each client hears in their head, and it'll work for you too. Click the link in the description now and get direct access to us for personalized analog mastering that accurately translates what you hear in your head.